Hello, gentle marketers. Welcome to episode 56 of the Gentle Business Revolution podcast, the show where we talk about marketing your business by disrupting the current marketing paradigm and changing it to a gentler approach, one that's based on empathy and kindness. I'm Sarah Croce. I'm the host here, and you know that you're in the right place if you are a heart-centered entrepreneur or change maker who is looking for a different and much better way to market your business. Or you might also be a marketing impact pioneer. That's someone who's working for an organization, maybe in the marketing department, who does business for good. Today's episode falls under the P of promotion of the Gentle Marketing Mandala. And today we'll dive into storytelling once more with my guest, Howell. I'll tell you more about Park in just a second, but real quick, two things. First, are you already following our Kickstarter campaign page, which goes live in December? If not, you can go over to sarahsanacroce.com/Kickstarter and hit notify to be sure to know when I hit the launch button for that campaign. It'll be a fun event, I promise. And the second thing, if you're new here, a big warm welcome. I'm so happy you found your way here. I organize the conversations on this podcast around the 7 P's of gentle marketing, and they are passion, personal power, people, product, pricing, promotion, and partnership. And I present them in the form of a mandala, which you can download as your one-page marketing plan at sarahsanacroce.com/one page, the number 1 page. I'm hoping that these 7 email prompts will help you reflect upon all your assumptions around marketing and really find back to a way to market your business that is aligned with your values. Okay, so back to today's show. Howell is known as the world's most industrious storyteller, helping leaders of purpose-driven brands grow by as much as 600%. His 35 years in brand creation includes 20 years running his own ad agency, Park&Co. He was named Advertising Person of the Year in 2010 by the American Advertising Federation of Metro Phoenix. Park is the founder of the Business of Story, a proven platform based on his 10-step story cycle system to clarify your story, amplify your impact, and simplify your life. His popular weekly Business of Story podcast is ranked among the top 10% of the most downloaded podcasts in the world. His new book, Brand Bewitchery, How to Wield the Story Cycle System to Craft Spellbinding Stories for Your Brand, helps readers clarify their brand story and teaches how to tell it through 3 proven narrative frameworks that captivate audiences and convert customers. In today's episode, we talk about Park's path from traditional advertising to storytelling, about his definition of sustainable storytelling. We also talk about Park's opinion about brand storytelling for solopreneurs, the dark side of storytelling, and how Park sees the future of storytelling, as well as many more insights. So here's my conversation with Howell. Hey, Park, how are you today?
Sarah, I'm doing well. Thank you very much.
So good to have you here. I'm really excited. Storytelling is always a topic that is intriguing to me because I come from this very kind of left brain oriented marketing background. And I shared with my listeners several times that to me, switching to the right brain was actually quite difficult. So that kind of as a setting for what we're going to be talking about today. But I want you to actually start and tell listeners your story because I think it's quite an intriguing one given your background as well.
Oh, well, thank you. It's so much fun to be here, and I really appreciate you having me on your show. You know, I grew up in the Pacific Northwest here in America, up in Seattle, Washington. I'm one of 7 kids, and we
Wow.
lived in a wonderful place called the Happy H, is what my mom and dad called it. So they even had a brand growing up, the Happy H, and I didn't really appreciate that until I got older. That it was actually a brand my dad had put together for the little. It was a 12-acre ranchette we grew up on there, and I was always fascinated with music and entertainment and promotion, not so much on the performance side. I started playing the piano when I was 3 years old, or 3 years, third grade.
Hmm.
But I always got like just really nervous. I had utter and complete performance anxiety, probably because I was never very well prepared for my recitals that I would have to play through on Christmas, and I'd usually botch those. But I was always fascinated with the business side and the creation side of music. And I went to school. I studied music composition and theory in university. I also got a degree in communications because I figured I could make a living in the advertising world. But I really wanted to follow my passion and interest in music composition and theory. And I did. So I got 2 degrees. And throughout my life, I have made a living in the ad world. I ran an ad agency of my own agency for 20 years here in Phoenix, Arizona. I've been in the branding arts and advertising world for 35 years. And Sarah, it was in 2006 when I was about 10 years into my ad agency, Park&Co, that I realized advertising as we knew it just wasn't working anymore. Even the brand development work we did wasn't working anymore. It all felt very shallow to me.
Hmm.
And in looking back, what I realized is leading up to 2006, advertising was easier. When all we
Hmm.
had was TV, radio, print, direct mail, events, public relations, and no Yelp. But
Right.
as the technology took over, where brands used to own the influence of mass media, the masses were becoming the media back then. And now, of course, they are the media, and they own your story. They own my story, and they are happy to share their pros and cons about you and your brand with the world. It was then that I wanted to learn, and I knew I had to make a change. I thought, how do we communicate in this over communicated world? And I was lucky as the universe would present itself. Our middle child, our son Parker, went to film school at Chapman University in Orange, California, 2006 to 2010, graduated, and he's been in Hollywood ever since. He
Oh,
is a
wow.
director,
Yeah.
and he does a lot of virtual reality work. And in fact, they're just launching a premiere on Twitch on July 25th of a interactive live stream real-time Dungeons and Dragons show. I mean,
So fun.
it's mind-boggling with the animation, the work they've got going into it. But while he was going to school, I said, Parker, please send me your books when you're done with them, since I'm paying for them, because I would like to learn, what do they teach you in Hollywood? What does Hollywood know that I need to know as a marketer to stand out in this extraordinarily noisy world? And that's when I found Joseph Campbell, The Hero's Journey. I looked at it, compared it to the work we were doing in brand strategy development, and I realized it was a beautiful template. It just needed to be tweaked a little bit. So instead of the 12 to 17 steps of the hero's journey, depending on who you read, I boiled it down and mapped it to business in 10 steps. And I called it the story cycle system. And I started using it, and we had phenomenal success with it. It was like a science project. I had no idea if it was going to work or not, but we had phenomenal success with it. And I think it's because what it does is it makes the owner of a brand or a business really get in touch with who they are, why they do what they do, what they stand for in the world, which then ultimately helps the brand stand out, and how to connect on a very human level through understanding and empathy with their audiences, with their customers.
Mm,
The old
yeah.
cold way of marketing is about features, functions, and benefits. To
Yeah.
me, the new form of marketing is story, because it makes you get in touch with who you are and who your customers are.
Yeah. I find it so powerful that you learned this from your son, because clearly, the old way just wasn't working anymore, and the society had evolved. Also, the newer generations were just never exposed, or were still exposed to the facts and features of the ad age, but they're like, oh, this is really not resonating with me. Why are they talking at me instead of, inviting me into the conversation? And yeah, it's so interesting that you learned that from the younger generation, your son, right?
That's funny. Yeah. I kind of had that sense even when I got into the advertising business in the middle 80s. And when I was working for other agencies and as a copywriter, they would tell me to write ads one way. And I thought, this is stupid. This feels like old fashioned. And this is even back in the 1980s. And I'm like, why don't we actually kind of maybe even point, have some fun, show our vulnerability, demonstrate to people that we're actually real people that are running these companies and these services and whatever. And let's show our vulnerability and have some fun with this. And so I was very fortunate because I worked for a guy that had me writing and producing a lot of radio commercials. And they were typically 60-second radio commercials. And I got to the point that I could tell a really fun and interesting and surprising story in 60 seconds. And I'll tell you, Sarah, I had no idea what I was doing. No one taught me this. I was just purely going off of gut and thinking, what would interest me? Mm-hmm. But with my studies in music composition and theory has helped me throughout my entire career, because those same dynamics that Mozart used to create a sonata allegro, Beethoven used, they were all storytelling principles. I didn't realize it at the time, but in looking back, I realized that the same structures of building a beautiful symphony are pretty much the same structures that go into creating a long-form narrative, a presentation, a brand narrative strategy, and in a small way, little story structures. And so it came full circle for me. I intuitively understood back in the 80s that story worked. I had no one taught me that. I just got it in my gut. But what I learned after studying in 2006 is that we are all intuitive storytellers. We are storytelling apes, basically. It's what separates us from all other beings as we think and act and coalesce in story. But what it did for me is it moved me from being an intuitive storyteller to an intentional one. And that's what I coach and teach now, is demonstrate to people, here's how you ignite that inner storyteller. Here are frameworks you can use that are proven to help. And it has just immense power on branding, advertising, marketing, growth, the growth of your people, the growth of your brand, the growth of your business.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting how you demonstrate that this, in a way, you had to go through your own story to realize who you were. You were always, believing that stories is what connects with people. But in a way, you were also maybe kind of brainwashed into the ads, this is how it's done, facts and figures, until you came full circle and were like, no, listen to my intuition, and this is really what works. And because that's kind of how I feel as well. It's like, we've been brainwashed with this one way of how it's done. And if we're actually listening to our gut, then you're right. We're all, storytellers. It's just that we need to give ourselves permission to actually do that in our marketing.
There's a great book out there by Yuval Harari called Sapiens. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you've had a chance to read it or if your listeners have. But it's a study. It's kind of an anthropological dig. It's really a fun read, taking us back to Homo sapiens and where we are today. And then he's got another one that came right after that that's really good. But he talks about the storytelling capability of the Homo sapien to great length. And to me, it's absolutely fascinating. It's just like our ability to tell a story is just like having a left arm or a right arm. It is just innate in who we are as beings. But in business, we tend to leave our storytelling skills behind, much to the detriment of the organization, because we want to look smart, we want to sound logical, we want to think rationally, when our customers are not that. Our customers are buying with emotion. I say that people buy with their hearts, they justify their purchases with their heads. Well, when was the last time you were bored into buying anything? When was the last time did you buy anything because of the data? When was the last time you bought anything because of the PowerPoint presentation? You don't. We buy because of the stories we hear. And the beautiful thing about that, people can say, well, storytelling then can be very manipulative. And it can for only so long, because stories deliver a truth that creates the trust. And if you are telling stories that are not truthful, that did not really happen to someone, that did not have the outcomes that you proclaim they have, you will be eventually found out. And all trust will be out the window. And every brand is built on trust. So when you become a proficient storyteller, you don't become manipulative. You go just the exact opposite way. You realize that you find the hidden truths, the universal truths that share our values and beliefs with the same values and beliefs our customers have. And that is a marriage made in heaven. That's where you want the brand to be. But you only find that through the true stories told well about the impact you have in the world.
I want to spend a moment on the dark side to storytelling so that we can then, go back into the positive side of storytelling. But I was just reading an article yesterday that we should be prepared for an era of gaslighting in this aftermath of the virus, basically brands and politics telling us stories to maybe make us forget certain dark things that just happened in this confinement. And these, like, if these companies and politicians know certain storytelling strategies, or they're just maybe intuitive at telling these stories and connect on an emotional level, isn't there a chance that storytelling is being abused for those things as well?
Oh, sure. You can use storytelling for evil and not good. We've been experiencing that in America for the last 3.5 years with Donald Trump. His whole entire administration are nothing but filled with a bunch of gaslighters. And it does have an impact on some people, but not all people, not the majority of people. I think people can see through it. I'm a big believer too that with my work, I train people to teach them how to spot story and understand when you are being told a story, and you can dissect it, because you have to understand the magic if you're going to cast the spell. And actually that line came from right after Donald Trump got elected. The very next day, I did a podcast interview on my show, Business of Story, with a gentleman by the name of Dr. Randy Olson. And we talked about narrative intuition, this and button, therefore, foundational narrative framework that we teach, and how Donald Trump was so good at it. But what I told people is, I said, now you have to be prepared, because the gaslighting is going to come. And at that time, I said, you have to understand the magic if you're going to combat the spell, which means you have to pay attention to what they're saying to you if you are going to combat it. Now, I've changed that, so it's more positive. Now, if you want to use story for good, I say you have to understand the magic to cast the spell. So in the gaslighting realm, we just saw today, Pence was saying, I'm in Arizona, which we've got a surge going on right here.
Right.
Pence was yesterday saying that, they're flattening the curve in Arizona and all of our corrective measures are taking place and blah, blah, blah. Total outright lying. There are no corrective measures that are being put in place here, other than wearing a mask and social distancing. Our COVID-19 cases are through the roof and growing. And so when you sit there and look at that, it's just a bald-faced lie. He's not even telling a story.
So that's
He's
not
just
really a story.
All out lying. Yeah. And mostly, I think, when people are gaslighting you, trying to gaslight you, I don't know that they really dive deeply into story dynamics. I think it's much more about bombarding you with facts that are so outrageous they couldn't possibly be true, and they hit you hard enough and long enough with them that finally you like give in and go, yeah, okay. I don't think that's storytelling. I think true stories can overcome gaslighting anytime, but they got to be true stories well told.
It's almost like storytelling has this positive connotation to it. And I see this, fire and people sitting around the fire. That's storytelling to me, where you're right. What Trump and maybe also, companies, what they will be doing is making us believe that, nothing is bad and we just have to go back to spending. And that's how we overcome our uncertainty or our fear or whatever. you're right. That's not storytelling because that's not based on something positive. There's no really emotional connection. So I think people will be able to differentiate the two.
Yeah, I think people are smart. I think consumers are smart, and especially now with the internet. And as we had talked about earlier, where they own the masses are in charge of the media in a lot of respects, and they call BS a lot.
Yeah.
And I don't think brands are going to survive in an attempt to gaslight people, because I think we have such an educated consumer populace now that they will call them out, and it won't be good for the brand. I think maybe just the exact opposite is going to happen. After people have seen what has happened in America, I had a guy on my show 2 weeks ago from Ireland, and he said, Park, we have gotten to the point that we pity America.
Yeah.
I mean, how horrible is that?
Yeah.
So I don't think people are going to allow the gaslighting to go on. I think we can combat it only because we've seen it in its worst cases with the Trump administration.
Yeah, and I get goosebumps. I have to just tell you this, Park, because I have a lot of Americans on my show, and I still find that most of them shy away from bringing up politics, and the name of my show is The Gentle Business Revolution. So when I do talk about politics, it's always with a gentleness and compassion, even for the Trump administration. Like, I'm not there to just create conflict and talk bad about people, but I am also talking about sharing more of our worldview. And so that's what I so appreciated also about your website and the way you pitched me to be on this show. And one line that stood out to me was this term that you're using called sustainable storytelling. So tell me more. I'm intrigued what that means to you.
Well, before I really got heavy duty into storytelling out of the necessity of hacking through the noise and hooking the hearts of our audiences, I was doing a lot of work in sustainability, and it was even before the S word was around, both story and sustainability. So I was doing work in environmental causes, social causes, the ad agency was, and I just was gravitated to that because I thought, we could use our marketing and selling skills for something other than just selling products and services. What if we do it with behavior change? So we launched a water conservation campaign that grew throughout North America back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and it's still running today, Sarah, which how often do you have a campaign that runs for more than 20 years? But that's how powerful it was. We've done clean air campaigns. We've done blood drives. We've just done a lot of this kind of work. So that was always one of my bent, sustainable work, green marketing, that kind of thing. Then when I found storytelling, I found you could be even more powerful with that behavior change using storytelling. And so we did. We worked with it with Adelante Healthcare, an amazing CEO out here by the name of Aveen Sete-Tafoya. And we worked with her to turn around their organization, create a new story around sustainable healthcare for them. They went from almost going out of business in 2010 to now this past year, they have marked a 600% growth in their organization precisely because they got their story dialed in, their story around sustainability. So I was having a lot of success with that, and Arizona State University called and said, would you be a part of this executive master's program that we're creating? This was back in 2013, and teach executives around the world how to do this. And what it is my story cycle system, that same 10-step process that I learned from my son's film school through, inspired by Joseph Campbell. And I taught them how to apply it in their companies. And these were companies large and small and NGOs and individuals and whatever. And it was all about branding their initiative so it made sense to their audience, whether they were talking to employees or customers or regulators or communities. You have to brand and create a central focus to anything, any initiative that you're trying to do. And then how do you first construct the overall narrative? What is this initiative about and why should you care? What is the beginning point? What is the end point? How is it a journey that we are inviting you on? And what is going to happen in every step of that journey, both the highs and the lows, to get us to where we want to go, which is always a better place, is always a better world. So I simply taught them how to do that. And I started calling it sustainable storytelling because you are using the art, I call it the applied science and bewitchery of storytelling to get people to reframe their point of view on any given social issue or environmental issue, and then invite them into the story as an active participant in your campaign, in the journey you are going to take them on. So it has many levels to it. The story cycle system gives you that overarching narrative that you need when you're going in to present what you want to do and offer you the vision and the guide for your initiative. And then there are these little story elements. I mentioned the and button, therefore, earlier that you use to help focus the overall message and even the points you were going to make. And then I teach something called the 5 primal elements of a short story for big impact. And that is when now you have to back up the points that you are making with not stats, facts, charts, and graphs and data, but with a true story about the real world impact you either have made, are going to make, are currently making, or are going to make your business points for you. Then and only then do you bring in the numbers to support it. But everything before that is all narrative-based, story-based. And to me, I have found that is the best way to sustain any sort of movement. And so I call it sustainable storytelling.
Yeah, I love that. I think when I think of my audience, they're mainly solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, small business owners. Sometimes this idea of brand storytelling kind of is overwhelming for them because they're not even sure they call themselves a brand. So what you just shared, I think, totally applies to entrepreneurs as well. And the way I see it is that their big story, the why story, why they're in business, what they, what their worldview is, what they care about. That's usually what goes on the about page or the home page. So kind of like, who are you and what do you care about and how are you different? I still run a LinkedIn consulting business, and on that about page, well, I share how I'm different from all these other LinkedIn consultants. And so when someone makes a buying decision, the conscious client today, they, like you previously said, they make a decision often based on emotions, whether, there's a connect or not. So there's this big one story, and then there's also these smaller stories where I would say probably that you share your worldview and your values in your newsletter or your emails, and what you just did on the show here, you shared your worldview because you were taking a stand, a political stand, right? So those are the small stories that are maybe not as researched or not as staged.
Yeah, I would say I'm not even taking a political stand. I'm taking a survival stand. When we have the Vice President of the United States telling America and the world that everything is okay in Arizona and the curve is flattening and we got it all under control, he's outright lying, and it's impacting our lives here in America and can impact the lives in the world. So either way, but to your point, let's go back and talk a little bit about some people think, and I totally get that, solopreneurs think they don't have a brand. Mm-hmm. So can I ask you, Sarah, can you name for me like one of your best friends? You can just give us a first name.
A first name that comes to mind. The
first name of one of your best friends.
Yeah. What comes to mind is Patagonia and Whole Foods, those two.
Oh, okay. So I was actually thinking about a person.
Ah, okay. People.
Not a big brand, just your best friend or one of your best friends.
Oh, friends. Okay. I understood brand.
Yeah. Oh,
I'm
sorry.
And brand.
Friend's brand. I wasn't pronouncing it very well.
One of my best friends' name is Christina, for example.
Christina. Mm-hmm. How would you describe Christina?
Christina is very outgoing. She's very positive always very upbeat. She's probably more extroverted than I am. And just overall, I like to be in her company because she just has this positive aura.
Can you take us to one moment that you have experienced with Christina that demonstrates or supports any one of those adjectives you just gave us? Outgoing, positive, upbeat, extroverted. Can you take us to one experience, one moment you've had with her?
Mm-hmm. This is kind of cheating because I'm actually working on a TEDx story, and she's in that story. But
Perfect.
I'll
It
share
must
it
be a
anyway.
good one. Perfect.
Yeah, so I'm dancing with her. So she invited me to this free dancing experience that's called free dancing. And I've always loved to dance. And so I said, well, yeah, I want to come. I was kind of in a bad time myself, not really feeling good about marketing anymore. And so we went to this dance, and yeah, everything was just so happy and positive. Everybody was so welcoming. They had, a little tea to welcome us, and then everybody was just doing their own thing. There was no like choreography to follow, and yeah, we were just having a good time. And just to finish the story, that's the focus on Christina. But the point that I'm making in this story is that I realized that I was just enjoying being so free and not having anyone tell me how to dance, what to do. And that kind of triggered an aha moment for me that I wanted to come back to doing that in my marketing as well, following my own rules.
That story is about freedom.
Yes.
But Christina, you described who she is, and you told us a story about, an experience with her to back that up. You just explained the brand of Christina, a single person. And we all have a really good sense now of who she is, what she's about, and why you were attracted to her. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to do that for your listeners because I want them to know that even if they're a solopreneur, one or two person shop or whatever, you have a brand, and that means meaning. Your brand, think of it this way, are simply the stories people tell about you when you're not in the room. And if you don't control that story, they will make stuff up. That's where the brand storytelling comes in, to really understand what your purpose is in the world. Why do you exist beyond making money? What is your brand purpose? Why do you exist, or how do you help people level up their lives by what you offer? When you focus on that sort of impact, the money takes care of itself. The revenue will take care of itself. But it's a big shift. It's a shift away from trying to think, I got to pay the bills this month versus how many people can I help? Then the bills, you find out, all of a sudden start taking care of themselves, and you make more money than you could ever possibly imagine. You even have money to give away, to put into nonprofits or whatever. But the point here being is when you think in story and you think about your brand is not the center of the story. Your customers are. You are simply their mentor or guide to help them get what they want on their journey, to help them overcome their obstacles in their stories by how you are uniquely equipped to help them. So you had mentioned earlier, Sarah, too, about, your brand is to make you different. I think it's both different and more distinctive than your competition. So we live in this world of abundance. We have abundant choices of who to choose to buy from, to hang out with, to go free dancing with, to do whatever. We have abundant choices, which automatically makes us all commodities in the world. Mm-hmm. Whether you are a one-man band or you are Nike, you're still a commodity because we're all offering more or less the same things. The only way that you take a step out of being a commodity and really demonstrate your uniqueness to create greater value and brand loyalty is in the story you tell about your brand. And oh, by the way, to your point earlier, that story needs to be authentic. It needs to be real. It needs to be about who you are, why you do what you do, what drives you to do it, and how then you are there in service to help your customers get what they want out of life.
I'm going to take that cue about authentic because I think that's a big thing in storytelling. These two words, authenticity and transparency, have almost become buzzwords. And I do see marketers abusing or kind of like, using almost too much transparency or faking authenticity because they know that this is now what sells. Have
faking
you seen
authenticity.
That too? Yeah.
Well, but here's the thing. I think maybe they're misguided or they're just not doing it very well. They mean well, but they don't know how to tell that story. I found out in green marketing and, that old term greenwashing, where people were out just making stuff up to look like they're green and so forth.
Yeah.
And I was really angry against that because I thought that was true. I thought the villains here was they are co-opting and corrupting the green marketing movement by going, and they're just greenwashing. What I found out, though, is most of those companies, while there were some bad actors in that, the vast majority of companies that were accused of greenwashing turned out they just didn't know how to tell their story very well, that they actually meant well.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned Patagonia earlier. They were one of the pioneers in proper storytelling around sustainability, because as they went in to start really being more progressive in their operations and trying to reduce their impact on the customer and on the planet, they started making lots of mistakes in that process. So what they did is they created the Footprint Chronicles, and they chronicled and shared everything they did, right, wrong, where they blew it, where they had victories. They hid nothing, complete and utter transparency. And in that was utter authenticity. So they became a leader that people could learn from, because people could witness their stories being told and where they had missteps and what worked and what didn't work. So they actually advanced the cause of sustainability, especially in the clothing industry, simply by being extraordinarily transparent and being authentic, in the stories they told. Others that aren't, I think, they're trying to, they just don't know how to tell their story very well.
Yes, that might be true. Remember, I'm talking also mainly about entrepreneurs. And then if they hear you have to be fully transparent, well, the stories that they will share are their own stories of their own lives and not necessarily always business related stories. And so what my clients always tell me, they're frightened. They're like, oh my God, really? Do I have to tell everything just to be transparent? And I always tell them, no, like there's different levels of transparency, and you're not going to tell everybody, that you have problems with your husband if that's what's going on right now. So I think it's this idea that all of a sudden we have to just put out everything into the world. And I think that's not the goal here.
No, you're exactly right, Sarah. It's know your audience. Know who's sitting across from you. What do they care about? And how can you connect with them through shared experiences, essentially? Something you felt, something that went horribly wrong that you want to talk about just because of what you learned from it. I mean, we get way more out of stories that tell us about the downfalls and the pitfalls and what went wrong than the happy stories of success. And I think the reason why is it's just basically evolution. It's ingrained in us that we want to know the problems. I want to live vicariously through your story so that I can try on your trouble that you experienced and learn what I would do in case it ever happens to me. And I get to do that from the safety of an easy chair, or from the safety of a boardroom, or the safety of an office meeting. But that's what we love about these stories, when we are listening to someone and they take you into the dark night of the soul and, oh gosh, we tried this and then this blew up and then it couldn't have gotten worse, but it did. And you're sitting there riveted because you're like, well, how'd you get out of it? Then what happened? Then what happened? And then when you teach them or share with them how you got out of it, you teach them a lesson, something that they learn that like, that's what I'll do in case it ever happens to me. Sure, I'm glad you went through that. I think I would like you as a trusted advisor. That's the power of it.
Yeah.
But we don't want to look stupid, right? We don't want to look like we're losers. We don't want to look like we ever make a bad mistake because we're thinking people won't trust us if we make, mistakes. Well, everybody makes mistakes. And when you own up to them, you build even more trust.
Yeah, I agree. I take that even a step further and say that nowadays the conscious client doesn't want to just hear old stories and how people or companies have overcome certain mistakes or dark night of the souls. They want to be included in today's stories. So they want to hear what's going wrong today, because otherwise it creates this feeling of exclusion again. And that's what the conscious client no longer wants. He doesn't want to feel excluded and like the guru who's made it. He wants to be included and understand he has overcome certain struggles, but there's still things that he's constantly learning and making mistakes. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. And Sarah, I was going to ask you, what do you mean by today's stories?
Like, for example, right now, I just shared with my newsletter subscribers that right now, I think it's time to plant seeds, and that maybe 2020 is not a year for harvesting, and that right now in my business there's not much going on. I'm not launching any new group programs, and it's just one of those years. So that's a story of right now, not how I overcame a struggle 10 years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And however, you may have that how I overcame a struggle 10 years ago that you can apply to that right now story. So to your point, it is a time of planting seeds and connecting with people. And we, I think, are experiencing that the world over. We simply are here, certainly are here in America. But I can also point back to in my 35-year career, let's talk about 9/11 when the towers came down. Mm-hmm. We had that same experience here in America. It didn't last, nor was it as nearly troubling as what's happening globally with the pandemic. But we had to settle back and say, okay, our life has appreciably changed. What do we do now? We've lost half of our business because people are afraid. So what are we going to do? And it was planting seeds and building. And then we had that same thing happen with the global recession that hit in 2008. And only it was way worse because it was global. So what did we do and how did we get through that? What were the mistakes we made, but what did we do that helped us survive it? And what did we learn from those two instances that we can apply today to help us get through this pandemic and the economic wreckage that it has created?
Yeah, good point. Tying it back to a previous struggle that we've overcome somehow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because if you're going to go into war with anybody, you want that person in the foxhole sitting next to you to have more experience than you have, so you can rely on them. Like, okay, what do we do next, right? Mm-hmm. So, and I think that's just life in general. You want to surround yourself with people that share your same beliefs and values and have experience that you don't have, so that you can go farther together.
How do you see the future of storytelling? Will there ever be an overdose of stories? Will people get sick of them?
No, because it is ingrained in who we are. Homo sapiens, we are storytelling animals. So it's always going to be around. I think people will get, maybe they'll get a little bit gun shy. Maybe, as you were saying about the gaslighting, they might think about it. But really, anytime you sit down, you're sitting across from Christina or your loved ones, friends, family, whatever, you're always telling stories, are you not? Yeah. So it's going to be here forever, as long as we're here. And
I think as long as we're not trying to fake those stories, that's...
Yeah, but people are so wise now that you fake a story, it is eventually going to come out. People are going to figure you out if you're not telling the true story. But the most beautiful things to me about story is it creates optimism. Mm-hmm. When you can tell a true story, and even if it's a fiction looking into tomorrow or next week or what does the fall look like, let's picture that together. Again, Homo sapiens are the only animals, the only beings that we know of that can think in the future and picture it in fiction and then talk about that and pull everybody together to advance that fiction to try to make it a reality one day. And to me, there's just a tremendous amount of optimism in that and bringing people together, people from diverse worlds. My big push now, we are so fractured as a nation here in America, and really you're seeing it around the world. And it's because there are different camps that have different stories. And I think us story practitioners can start bringing those worlds together by doing the first three things you have to do if you're a great storyteller. First thing is to say nothing, but to listen. Listen. And as you are taking in that content, place it in the form of a narrative or a story that makes sense. In that listening process, you now begin to really understand where that person is coming from on the other side, on the other side of the table. And even if they are completely a dichotomous world to yours, you still have something in common. It could be the health of your family, the opportunity for your kids. It could be whatever. So in that understanding, you start trying to find areas of common ground that you can create these two worlds together. connect these two worlds together. And that's where the empathy comes in. Then and only then, after you've listened, tried to do your best to understand and connect with common ground through empathy, do you start finding the right stories to share that your audience can live vicariously through and get them to the point of saying, wow, you're like me. Oh, wow, you kind of want the same things I do. And so I think, Sarah, that story is going to play an invaluable role for generations to come on bringing worlds together and not dividing them.
Yeah, and I love that focus on the positive aspect of stories, right? They make us feel hopeful for the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm hopeful. I think we can get through this. I think our pendulum is starting to swing back, and we can find some more humanity and sanity in our world.
Yeah, things don't change until they get really, really bad. And that's what we had to experience as humanity. So there's definitely hope. Well, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Park, for coming on to the show and talking to us about storytelling. Please do share your website and where people can find you.
Well, thank you, Sarah. This has just been wonderful. Great way to kick off my Friday morning. And I love doing these international shows because I get to hear different insights from people other than Americans. And that's really, really refreshing to me.
I could go on and on about that all day long.
Well, I'll have to have you over on the Business of Story, my podcast. I'm in my 5th year. July is my 5th anniversary. I have 262 shows out there now. Oh,
my goodness. Wow.
And I feature story artists from around the world to help leaders of purpose-driven brands craft and tell compelling stories that sell. And you can find it at iTunes and all the places, or on my website at businessofstory.com. And the podcast is called Business of Story with my name, Park Howell, on it. But I'm also really excited and proud to let you know, Sarah, that I've got a new book out. And it's taken 6 years to write it. I wrote it, and then I would proof it out, and I would test it, and then I rewrite it. And anyways, it's called Brand Bewitchery, How to Wield the Story Cycle System to Craft Spellbinding Stories for Your Brand. You can buy it on Amazon, print or Kindle copy. If you buy it and you read it, I would love a review because that helps new authors like me get found in the Amazon jungle. But I'm really proud of the work, and it will take you step by step through the story cycle system that you can apply it. It's really as much of a guidebook as anything, so you can apply it to the crafting of your own brand story strategy. And in it, I share these proven techniques and I demonstrate through a lot of different little short stories how you can use them in your business. So my idea here is it is the one book, the only book you need to not only get your story dialed in, but then teaches you how to tell it and how to activate it. I've got a marketing plan in there that says, here are the things you now have to think about when you take your story to the world. So very, very proud of that. And then the final thing I would say is I've got a complimentary or an online course that complements the book, and that can be found at businessofstory.thinkific.com.
Wonderful. Well, we'll make sure that we link to all those resources, and congrats on the book. I'm just in the editing process of my Gentle Marketing Revolution book, so I know totally how you feel, and very excited for you. Thank you so much.
Oh,
I have one last question, Park. I always ask my guests what they're grateful for today, this week, this year.
I am grateful for my family. I have the most amazing wife. We've been married for, it'll be 33 years here next week.
Wow.
Gosh, I better write that down so I don't miss our and she has supported me with every crazy, wild thing I've ever wanted to do. She's been all in, and we've had a chance to travel around the world with my work, and she's always right alongside, and she takes me to some of the most adventurous places. We have so much fun, and we have 3 wonderful kids and a grandson, and I'm just thankful they're all healthy. They're all fun people. They're really good people, and that's really the thing that I'm most proud of in my life.
Wonderful. Thanks again for being a guest on my show. I absolutely appreciate it.
Sarah, thank you. And I'd like to leave with one last thought, if I could.
Please.
As people are working on their stories and trying to become better at storytelling, I want them to remember one thing, and that's this, that the most potent story you will ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make sure you make it a great one. Thanks for having me, Sarah.
Thank you, Park. I hope you enjoyed this conversation and it really helped you think about your stories. You can download Park's free What's Your Story field guide at businessofstory.com/storytelling-tools. I hope you'll tune back in this Wednesday when I release this episode about healing your insomnia, or just tools and ideas and strategies about dealing with sleep in challenging times. And then next Friday, a week from now, I will post another regular episode about the P of partnership, where I talk to Alice about her introvert giveaway. Until then, take care of yourself, take care of those around you, and be the change that you want to see in the world. Speak to you soon.